Relapse is a philosophical thriller that will be a feature film estimated around 1 hour and 20 minutes long. It could also be considered an experimental sci-fi thriller. The tones of this piece will be thrilling, bleak, desolate, enthralling, and pertinent. And the setting and location is rural Washington. The overall ambience of the atmosphere is slow and dreary and cloudy. The weather is going to be reflecting the nature of this film, which will be heavily foggy. It'll be raining constantly, and there will be many shots of Washington with clouds hanging low and of characters being reflected through bodies of water, puddles, reflections in the water, or through windows that are covered in water, etc. The opening scene of Relapse will be of a newscaster. She is announcing how killing is now legal. 40% of humanity has already started to de-evolve. They are no longer biped organisms. They no longer have conscious thought. They no longer have free will. Killing is now considered a byproduct of nature. Humanity has begun to reach a decline, and scientists and nobody can figure out the anomaly that is people losing conscious thought. It is a scientific phenomenon, and people who have de-evolved are now considered animals. Truly. When a lion kills or a bear kills, it is considered their nature, their predatorial nature. It is not something that is seen as immoral. And now the same has been applied to the human species as they started to mentally decline. Humans can now be treated either as house pets if they started to relapse, or they could go out, commune in nature, and survive to the best of their ability. The relapse is almost like early onset dementia, and it was inspired by 4 stanzas of poetry that I had written. Strip me of all my humanity until I am nothing but an animal, a being without a conscience, a predator with no empathy. Strip me bare until I am nothing but an extension of the earth. Those are the stanzas of poetry that inspired this whole concept. Trigger warning: gore, sexuality, torture, and trauma. Dr. Barnaby is a 45-year-old white man, and he is our anti-hero. He works at the University of Washington as a biomedic professor and a biochemist. He also practices his own research, and he is adamant on figuring out why humans have started de-evolving. He is highly intelligent and is in the process of mourning his son, who was killed by one of the relapsed. With a lot of thought, he decided to propose trials to his students. He said that in participating in the trials, the money that they will be compensated will go towards tuition or anything that they wish. Eve is a 22-year-old student at the University of Washington. She is also in one of the chemistry classes that Dr. Barnaby is teaching, and she is also one of the first students to participate in one of his trials. She has also been experiencing lapses in her thinking and issues with walking, but she thinks that this is due to a condition called POTS. Her boyfriend also wants to opt in on the trials with her. His name is Peter, and he is an English major at the University of Washington with a concentration in poetry, and he is also one of the first students to participate in Dr. Barnaby's trials. He has begun to quietly notice signs in Eve of early relapse. He started to write a book inspired by it called Eve's Rib. I plan on using a lot of practical and low lights, especially in the operation room. The shot types will be extreme close-ups, 2-person shots. The movie will be set up like a film noir, visually looking like a 60s or 70s movie, even though it's produced a lot later. Dr. Barnaby has started to bait his students into participating in his trials so he can probe and discover potentially what would be causing the relapse. All the shots in the operating room will be shot in grayscale and will be shot on a wide lens for as much distortion as humanly possible. Most of the shots in the operating room will be heavily distorted and extremely theatrical. There will be multiple layering edits of human features all displaced in the same frame. There will also be some shots framed inside a skull and in the lab that will work as parallel shots, both with the same amount of exposure and parallel shadows. There will be intense exposure and dissolved shots when in the school setting, and the shots will be monochrome, except for hints of green in the skin and purple and pink for the lips and fingertips. Dr. Barnaby has been trying to lobotomize the students and also been trying to do shock tests to try and gain data. Dr. Barnaby has made it so the students can't opt out no matter what. They signed a legality contract in the beginning, and they possibly can't escape. Peter begins to think up a plan to try and get out of the trials and get him and Eve safely out of there. Most of the shots in the operating room will be from a very low angle to make the scientists and the people operating seem like gods. The students will mostly be shown through a monitor or on a screen, and Dr. Barnaby will mostly be shot through frame-by-frame shots. The oral composition, when in the operating room, will be a 500 hertz frequency that will cause eeriness and confusion, underlaying the background of classical music, etc. But the musical composition when out of the operating room will be the song Voice of Music by O.F. and Cute by Alex G. Another method used in Relapse will be step printing technique with lower frame rate. The shots of the students escaping will be shot with this step printing technique. Dr. Barnaby consults the rest of his scientists and his team to try and search for the students that have run away due to the legal binding contract, and he doesn't want to get outed for his crimes. Peter and Eve hijack a school car and they head to California. There will be muted tones of color in these scenes, and Eve has started to display extreme signs of hysteria. It is even hard for her to formulate her mouth and ways to speak. Peter has been extremely distracted, looking in the back seat, when she begins to view him as a predator. Due to her mind lapsing, she has begun to think of things in a mode of survival and threat. Eve begins to wail loudly and attack Peter, which causes him to wreck the vehicle. Eve is naturally very composed, but due to the relapse that has been occurring, she has begun to just completely unravel. It's hard for her to even walk or stand anymore, and conscious thought is becoming looser and looser. Peter has begun to brainstorm ideas for his book called Eve's Rib, where, as her descent of madness and becoming an animal, he begins to write, "Due to the crash, Peter just wants them to find safety, even in her own demise." Dr. Barnaby are still looking for all the lost students. Peter and Eve walk to a nearby diner, or attempt to walk, to formulate a plan. This is an example of the step printing technique that will be used in movement shots. Due to a TV screen nearby, 55% of humans have now descended to the relapse and have become more primal. Peter begins to draw and write and formulate a plan, whilst also studying Eve's mannerisms and formulating his own research. These shots are an example of the extreme wide lens that will be used to distort the characters that are experiencing relapse. And nearing the end of the film, there will be shadows completely encompassing Eve's face to truly show her demise as a thinking being. Peter begins to watch and mourn her presence even though she is still living. Once Eve fully succumbs to her condition, he is fully and mentally ready to let her go. She fully views him as a predator. Eve and Peter, right after the diner, decided to go into hiding and laying low. But when Eve's condition got too far gone, Peter decided it was best for her to do whatever she pleased, for survival means. The last shot will be of Peter and the diner smoking. Peter had finished writing his book of poetry that he had written from studying Eve, called Eve's Rib. Now that she was fully gone, he made a satirical poem in her honor about her condition. Dr. Barnaby can be seen in this final shot as him wrapping up his last poem. The target audience for this film is for the people that question humanity, morals, and ethics. This movie will be for people interested in philosophy, psychology, and morality.